have the pleasure of talking about our evaluation toolkit. Who loves evaluation here, right? Yes. This is my kind of room, my kind of people. All right, so we've realized in our conversations with a lot of you, as well as our current grantees, that there definitely is a need to, there was a question around really understanding the impact of programs, right? You're doing all this great work, and really fine-tuning and understanding the impact that you're having on the populations you serve can sometimes be challenging, right? It's probably one of the most difficult things you have on top of just implementing your program. So we wanted to provide a tool that we felt would really be helpful in doing just that. So we have our evaluation toolkit that we want to share with you today. So I want to provide just an overview of the toolkit, and with all evaluations, it's really helpful to have a framework. When we're talking about evaluation, what do we mean? What are we talking about? So we have this framework here. There's so many different frameworks. This is the framework that we're using here at Cottage. And there's no right or wrong way to do this, but I think definitely having a guide and a starting point is important. So as you see on our model here, we start off with engaging stakeholders. We really feel like this is an important first step. You want to better understand who it is you're working with and who needs to be a part of the planning process for your evaluation when you're thinking about who are you going to share this information with. All these are your key stakeholders that you don't want to wait till the end of your evaluation to engage, but engage them early on at the beginning. And then we move on to creating a logic model. And when I get into the tool, I'll talk a little bit about what a logic model is, but this is really kind of your roadmap. So at the beginning, the onset of your program, this is helping you to lay out the logic, basically, of the resources you're putting in, the activities you're doing, and the outcomes you want to see. And sometimes we think our logic is really sound, but when we put it on one piece of paper, there's some gaps. And I think this is a great tool that helps you identify those gaps. And it may mean either tweaking the outcomes you have or tweaking the strategies that you're implementing. And then once you feel that your logic is sound, from those outcomes you have, this will help you design your evaluation. So developing your evaluation questions, the methods you want to use, and then you move on to actually collecting that data and doing that in an accurate way so that you can trust the data that you're getting back. And then from there, we move on to analyzing and interpreting. One of my favorite parts, when you start asking those questions like, what does this mean? What is this data telling us? And then lastly, using and sharing those findings. And oftentimes this is a step that gets left off. How many people have collected data that goes nowhere? Just sits on a shelf somewhere. So the tool helps you walk through some questions to make sure that you're thinking about who are those key folks that we need to share this information with. Sound like fun, right? So this is our toolkit. It's on our Population Health Learning Lab, and I want to orient you to a few things before we go actually clicking through the website or the toolkit. So if you look on your left-hand side, this is a really helpful list of the different steps within the toolkit. So we talked about engaging stakeholders, creating logic models, all the way down to sharing and your evaluation findings. We also have some additional evaluation resources that are really helpful, and I hope that when you have some more free time, not that you always have free time, but when you do, you're sitting at home, hanging out, click on the evaluation resource. The other thing I want to orient you to, if you look on your right-hand side, when you see this icon here, the set of tools, this is where you can actually download the tools. So for each page that I'll walk you through, you'll see that icon, and that's where you'll actually download the tools. And then when you see this icon here, that's the piece of paper with a magnifying glass, this is where you're going to download case studies. And so for each of the steps within the evaluation framework, we have the tools that will walk you through all the steps needed, as well as a case study example from a fictitious community organization. It's actually called Health Connect, which is made up of, I think, the food bank, community center, and community clinic, and they actually contracted Promotores to connect patients to resources. So not a real organization, but I think an example that maybe a lot of you will be able to relate to. We also made a point to have that organization be a collaborative, because again, that's something that we're really moving towards, inspiring that spirit of collaboration. So I just want to click through a few of these, and feel free to click along with me. So the first step in the evaluation framework is engaging the stakeholders. You can also click on the top bar here as well. It will take you to the same page. So engaging your stakeholders, the first page of every step within the toolkit walks you through kind of why that step is important. And so for this, it talks about who your stakeholders are and how you might engage them. And as I mentioned, here is the icon for the tool itself. So when you click on that, it will take you directly to the tool. And this you can print out and use and work with your stakeholders on. And it walks you through those steps, so you don't really miss any steps within this step of the evaluation framework. So it's asking you about, have you identified your stakeholders yet? Have you determined your goals and engaging stakeholders? A whole set of questions that really help you to feel like, okay, we've completed this step. We're ready to move on to the next step. The other thing I want to show you is if you scroll down, there's this case study. So when you click onto the case study, then again, for the fictitious organization that we created, they filled out the template in the tool, so you can see how an organization might complete the tools in the toolkit. And I think this will be a great guide as you're just starting and using the tools. So we were on engage. Again, that's that first step, so important. Make sure you engage your stakeholders before you move on to creating your logic model. How many of you have used a logic model before? Oh, this is my favorite room in the world. So yes, I'm glad that most of you are familiar. In the toolkit, we have a template for logic models. There's so many out there. This is the template that we're using. We feel that is really user-friendly. I'm going to click on it now. So when you go into, again, it answers a lot of questions around what a logic model is, when you would use one. And then this is a template we're using for logic models, where you have your inputs, which are basically what resources are needed to implement the program. Then the outputs are what you're doing and who you're doing it to. And then lastly, your outcomes, both short-term all the way to long-term. Looks like fun, doesn't it? We've had a lot of fun geeking out on our logic models. So then the next step in the evaluation toolkit would be the design part. And I want to note here that the design portion of the toolkit is broken into two parts. So the first part is developing your evaluation questions. And again, that's why we really encourage engaging your stakeholders early on, because this is a great place to continue to engage your stakeholders and have them be a part of developing your evaluation questions. And when you click onto the tool here, I think one question that we've heard before is when you engage your stakeholders and you're developing your evaluation questions, you get a lot of questions, right? Everyone has different interests, so how do you narrow it down? And I thought that was a really great question, because you can't answer it all at once, and how do you prioritize? And so the tool here under develop evaluation questions really walks you through that and gives you a checklist here to figure out what questions you want to answer and which questions you may not want to answer. And I think some of those things about usefulness, that's a great question. Are we going to use this? Is this really useful? Is it feasible? That's a great question, but can we answer that question? So those kinds of questions are here in the toolkit that will help you walk through with your stakeholders and really narrowing down and pinpointing the questions you want to ask in your evaluation. The second part of design, developing the plan itself. And so here you're going to talk about what data you want to collect and what sources you should use. And again, clicking on the tool will walk you through a set of questions to help you go through that. So after you've designed your amazing, beautiful evaluation plan, the next step is to actually collect the data. And I think one important part of this tool is it talks about quality check, because oftentimes you may get data, but it's not data that's reliable. And so I think being able to answer these questions or walk through these quality checks are going to be really important to ensure that the data you get back is something you can really use. Also, the tool helps you walk through different data collection activities. So conducting a focus group, conducting interviews, direct observations, and surveys. Oftentimes, folks may feel that this is something you need to bring a consultant in to do. The tool really walks you through how do I conduct a focus group, and helping you to see that this is something you can do on your own, and walk you through all of the different steps needed. And again, the case studies are there to show you how the organization we created went through those steps. So after collecting the data, the next step is around analyzing and interpreting the data. So this walks you through organizing and making sure your data is clean, the different types of analysis, both quantitative and qualitative. So we're not just looking at number crunching, but also how do you pull out themes from the qualitative data you're collecting. So either focus groups or interviews that you've conducted. And then lastly, drawing conclusions and interpreting your data. Okay, and again here, there's case studies and tools for each of the steps, but I won't click on each one at this point. I'll leave all the fun for you. So the last step of the evaluation plan, I think, is one of the most important. As I mentioned before, we don't want your data to just sit on a shelf. We don't want it to be something that you did just because you felt you had to, but that you're really ensuring that the data you collect is being used, it's meaningful. And those are questions you ask at the beginning to ensure that it doesn't sit on the shelf. But this tool right here walks you through what recommendations are you coming up with, and what actions you're going to take as a result of that. So really making the results that you have useful and using that to improve your programs, maybe for advocacy purposes, whatever it is that's needed in your world. And I will click on the evaluation resources just so you know what they are. But we have some general evaluation resources here. We have other examples of logic models, data collection resources, as well as analyzing data resources. So I know I've gone really quickly through the toolkit. I think this is really going to be more real and tangible as you start to use it. As I said, there's no wrong way to use this toolkit. You can use, if you are in a place where you want to go straight to creating a logic model, you can go directly there. But if you're evaluating a brand new program, we really encourage you to start from the beginning, starting with engaging your stakeholders and making sure you have all the right folks on board, and then walking through the various steps together, bringing the handouts with you at meetings, and using that as a guide to kind of walk you through your evaluation process. So I want to pause there and ask, what are your initial thoughts, and how might you use this within your own organization?
I just wanted to compliment you because the content and the presentation for this toolkit is very nice, and I think it's going to be really essential and helpful to the rest of the community members to use.
Oh, that's great. And could you tell us a little bit about where you're from and how you might use this?
So my name is Kristen Presley, and I'm with Cottage Health. By design, I have to go through a slightly different process through the state. So we use a performance improvement project process. Mm-hmm. So any of our quality improvement programs will be going through the state mandated process. But from my background, I'm used to logic models coming from public health, so I see this as a very fundamental resource for the community. So I just wanted to compliment you and all the work that you guys have done.
Thank you. We have a comment back here.
I'm Han. I'm from UCSB, and I'm starting a brand new project, and so I have the job that I have advocating for queer and trans students at Student Health because there have been problems. So one of my first jobs is going to be to systematically evaluate in a way that goes from, okay, we have all these complaints to, an actionable plan that we can then check up on through the year. So this couldn't be better. I need to be starting an evaluation plan next week, and now I have all these tools.
Oh, you've made us so happy. So Hans is just talking about the usefulness of this tool and the work that he's doing with queer and trans students. Thank you. Any other thoughts, comments, reactions? Praise. We love it. Yes, we have a comment here in the front. Yes, and definitely suggestions, please.
Hi, I'm Sunita Jagmalani. I'm from Food Bank of Santa Barbara County, and I think these are really cool tools. What Monica went through, and you deal with those two together. This is very, very valuable. And since you mentioned Food Bank is a part of your fictitious, logic model, I'll be sure to check it out. I'm sure.
Yeah, we did that on
I'm sure
purpose.
I'll have some money lessons there.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Why do I keep leaning in? I think you can hear me when I stand back. Sorry. Any other thoughts, comments, feedback? Well, this is not the last time you have to provide us feedback. Definitely, you can write any additional feedback you have on the toolkit, on the pads you have. You can also send us feedback.